Question 75. Base your answers to questions 75 through 79 on the passage and map below. The map shows the average yearly precipitation in New York State measured in inches. Landscapes and precipitation. Moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean is carried to New York State by storm systems and air currents. Rain and snowfall amounts vary by region. Heavy snow belts are located near Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. If you want to know where Lake Erie and Lake Ontario is, this I wrote in as Lake Ontario, and this over here, around this spot, is Lake Erie. You can find it on the graphs they give you, all the charts they give you on the regions. So you can find that Lake Ontario is over here, and Lake Erie is about over here. Now, average, okay, fine. So let's do it again. Heavy snow belts are located near Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, as well as in the plateau regions of eastern and northern New York State. Now, Long Island and New York City usually experience lighter snowfalls. Snowfall amounts are converted to inches. In other words, in this diagram, it's converted to inches of water to determine yearly precipitation. In order for us to know how much precipitation falls in each area, when it says a number, it says 52 over here, it means this area gets about 52 inches of rain a year. This year gets 32 inches. This over here gets 28 inches. Above is 32. Below is 36. Over here is 44. New York City is 44 in both spots, 44 and 44. Now, so that's average yearly precipitation in inches. That's this map over here. Identify two bodies of water that are major sources of the precipitation that occurs in New York State. Now, they tell you to answer questions 75 through 79 on the information they're giving you. So they also ask you in question 75 to identify two bodies of water that are major sources of moisture for the precipitation that occurs in New York State. Precipitation is rain. Well, rain comes from the water rising when it warms up. So that's from Lake Ontario. And of course, Atlantic Ocean. You see a lot of New York State. The eastern New York State goes up and down the Atlantic Ocean. To the west of it, you have northwest and west is Lake Ontario. Completely west, you have part of New York State gets its precipitation, its rain, because of Lake Erie. So you know Atlantic Ocean, Lake Ontario, and Lake Erie. So they ask you to identify two bodies of water that are major sources of moisture for the precipitation of New York State. So they write blank and blank. So what you could do is, you could write in, you could write in, Lake Ontario is one, and Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean. So that would be a correct answer. However, you could have also said Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. You have to pick two out of these three. However, I said that you're supposed to use from the information they give you, you're supposed to come up with an answer. So let's look at the information they gave us. They told us that moisture from, that's how the information starts, moisture from, and then it asks, identify two bodies of water that are major sources of moisture. So moisture from, and question is, where is the moisture from? Right? Identify bodies of water, major sources of moisture. So where is the moisture from? The answer is moisture from. So I underline Gulf of Mexico, Atlantic Ocean, and then it says it's carried to New York State by storm systems and air currents, rain and snowfall. Amounts vary in region. Heavy snow belts are located near Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So they're telling you that the heavy snow belts are located near these two lakes means that the snow happens because of these lakes. That's where the moisture is from. So first Lake Ontario, and we said Atlantic Ocean. We did the two lakes together. Lake Ontario and Lake Erie is to the west, right? Here's Lake Ontario, then here's Lake Erie. Atlantic Ocean, of course, we know, right? Moisture from Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean. Gulf of Mexico we don't see over here. So, however, it does tell us that the moisture does also come from Gulf of Mexico. So you could have written Gulf of Mexico and Lake Erie, which gives less precipitation probably than the Atlantic Ocean and Lake Ontario does. But these are 4 of the 2 answers you have to put in. You have to put in 2 of these. And the answers you could give where the moisture is from is Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Atlantic Ocean. All these you'll know if you look at the map in the beginning of the book on the region, or in the back, wherever these graphs, wherever you'll find them, depending on the region. So you could see Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, and also you know the Atlantic Ocean, of course, that you also see. You don't even have to see, you know yourself, everyone knows the Atlantic Ocean is neck borders New York. And Gulf of Mexico, the reason why we know that moisture comes from, because it says in this information that moisture comes from the Gulf of Mexico. So for answer 75, identify 2 bodies of water that are major sources for moisture for the precipitation that occurs in New York State, for the rain that occurs in New York State. So remember 2 places, and you could pick out of 4. The 4 places you could pick, you only have to put in 2 of them. The 4 places you could pick is Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Atlantic Ocean, and down south, the Gulf of Mexico. And all you have to do is pick out 2 of them. Question 76. Identify the New York State landscape region that has the greatest average yearly amount of precipitation. So identify the place in New York State that has the most rain during the year. Well, let's look around, and all the numbers, the greatest amount of rain is where it says 60 inches. So what is this area of 60 inches? We know it's about, about 100 miles northwest of New York City, because a lot of us drive up there, let's say for the summer, and that's the Catskills. However, to make sure that that's the right answer, you look at the charts they give you. There's a chart of the generalized landscape of New York State, and it shows you that this area where it's 60 inches, that's the highest amount. This is, let's say, where's the lowest amount? Let's say this is 28 inches, right? Because over here you have land, right? The Atlantic Ocean is further out, by the way. So when you go up in New York, because you have some other states to the right of it, to the east. So where they have the most rain is where it says 60 inches. And if you look at the chart or generalized landscape of New York State, you'll see that the answer is the Catskills. Write down the Catskills. That's the answer to question 76. Question 77. Identify one process that occurs in rising air Question 77. Identify one process that occurs in rising air that produces clouds from water vapor. Well, let's look at the process of how clouds come about. First, it's warm, and warm air expands because it's near the water. If it's moist and it's warm, warm air rises, it's wider, and moist air also expands because the molecules of water weigh less than regular molecules of air. So warm air expands, and when it expands, it goes up, and the cool air, which is heavier, goes down. Because as you go higher and higher, it's cooler and cooler. The ground is warm from the sun heats up the ground, and then the heat goes upwards. As it goes higher and higher, it gets cooler. So, first the air expands, and that's the process of rising air that produces clouds from water vapor. So the air expands with the molecules of water in it, and it goes up. As it goes up, it's cooling. So you have cooling, air expands. Now when it gets up there, as it gets up there, it gets cold again. The air is going to get cold. So since the air that is getting cold, so it's squeezing back together, and it's also, squeezing means condensing. So it squeezes the air back together, and it squeezes the water molecules into water, and that's condensation. What is condensation? If you look up in the dictionary, condensation is to make or become more compact or dense, and it's also to change from vapor to liquid. So the question is, identify one process that occurs in rising air that produces clouds from water vapor. So if you know what condensing is, so we know that to condense is to change from vapor to liquid, and this is, it's going up, and as it gets cool, it's starting to condense, and when it condenses, the vapor becomes liquid. So they ask for, identify one process that occurs in rising air that produces clouds from water vapor. So you can either answer cooling, or air expands, or you can answer condensation. You only have to answer one of them, because it only asks you for one answer. So either cooling, or you can answer air expands, or you can answer this question condensation. And condensation again is to change from vapor to liquid, and also to become more condensed. When it goes up, when the air rises, it cools off and condenses. And when it does that, it changes the water molecules from vapor to liquid. So the answer is cooling, or the answer could also be air expands, and it could also be the answer condensation. Question 78. On the map below, draw one arrow to show the path that air travels to produce heavy lake effect snowfall in Oswego, New York. And they show you in the question Oswego, New York. I just put it into the graph I did with the areas of rainfall. I just put it in Oswego so you could see it. So here's Oswego, New York, and we want an arrow to show the path that air would have to travel to produce heavy lake effect snowfall in Oswego, New York. Now it's lake effect, means it's coming from a lake. And also it happens to be that the wind travels from the west to the east, right? Because the earth, the sun is rising in the east and setting in the west. Why? Because the earth is turning in this direction. It's turning towards the east. So since it's turning towards the east, so it's going faster than the wind is going. So therefore, question 78. On the map below, draw one arrow to show the path that air travels to produce heavy lake effect snowfall in Oswego, New York. So here's Oswego, they show you. So I put it into the graph I already have. I wrote Oswego. And you see that it's to the south is bottom of Lake Ontario, and to the east of Lake Ontario. So it happens to be that we know that air travels from west to east. We'll go over Lake Ontario or Lake Erie. So the question is, draw an arrow to show the path that air would have to travel to produce heavy lake effect snowfall in Oswego. Now, if you would do an arrow from Lake Erie, so that's not as true as from Lake Ontario, because from Lake Erie till it hits Oswego has to go over a lot of land. However, from Lake Ontario to Oswego, New York, it goes through a big, big lake, and at the end of the lake is Oswego. So that will give you the strongest, the most heavy lake effect snowfall for Oswego. So what you would do is, I already made this arrow, you make an arrow going across Lake Ontario, and going from west to east, and you just make like I did. This is the arrow, the pointer, and this is your answer. You just make an arrow going through Lake Ontario, pointing at Oswego. And that will give you a heavy lake effect snowfall, because the air is rising over the lake, and it's building up to make the snow, to make the precipitation. And when it hits land, when it's going to fall on the land, what land is going to hit? Well, if you have the arrow pointing toward Oswego, that means it's going to hit Oswego, and it's going to make a heavy lake effect snowfall in Oswego. Question 79. Describe 2 actions that could be taken to prepare for a forecasted severe snow event. Now, a forecasted event means an event that the forecast will happen, and it's going to be severe snow. A severe snow event means it's going to be an event of very much snow, and which severe snow means that the streets will be closed, the stores will be closed, and it's even possible you won't be able to leave your house for possibly a few days. And during that time, you're going to have to eat, you're going to have to have a warm house because it's going to be cold, you're going to have to drink and take care of other stuff. It's going to have to be, you're going to have clothing, heating, and all this has to be prepared beforehand. So let's give you a bunch of things that you could prepare. All these things is like a list, like someone wants to go shopping, so they don't know what to buy. So what they could do is take this list and go a little bit on the shopping spree. You know, they do have in some places, you could write down like go buy a kit, emergency kit that has everything in it, food, drinks, but those things you have to check all the expiration dates and everything. It's better to buy them all separately. This way you know that the food is not going to expire. Usually canned foods and bottled water should have a very late expiration date, at least for a few months. Some of them, usually canned food is for a few years. But in a severe weather storm, all you need is the food to last for a few days. So again, question 79. Describe 2 actions that could be taken to prepare for a forecasted severe snow event. Anyways, I listed 9 of them, and now I'm going to read them to you. So this is 9 different things that you could do to prepare. Prepare means to get ready, and this is for a forecasted severe snow event. So 1 is buy at least 1 gallon of water per person, per day. That means you never know what happens if people are sick. They feel dried out. Let's say there's no air in the house, or like this. Well, let's say it's very dry because of the heating, because of the insulation. So people are drinking more, whatever, they're not feeling well. 1 gallon of water should be enough for each person. So if the snowstorm is supposed to last for a few days, and another snowstorm is supposed to come in, and it's going to last for, let's say, a week. So you have 5 people in the house, so you have 7 days, 5 people, that's 35 gallons of water. But usually, you know, in New York City, if you're taking the regions in New York City, you're not going to have a snowstorm that will last usually more than a day or 2, maybe 3. So Let's see. Describe 2 actions that could be taken to prepare for a forecasted severe snow event. Okay, this is one. Buy at least 1 gallon of bottled water per person per day of that they think that the snowstorm will last, and also even after it ended the snowstorm that people will not be able to get to the stores. So you should buy that amount of water to last you. Doesn't really have to be bottled water. If it's just for a few days, you could fill up sink water also, but bottled water lasts much longer, it's healthier. Answer 2, I'm saying the second thing you could do is, to prepare for a severe snow event, is buy a lot of food that lasts long and does not need cooking or refrigeration. Just 1 or 2 days, doesn't have to last that long, but it's good to get food that lasts long because this way you have it prepared beforehand. You don't even have to, as soon as you hear there's a big snowstorm coming, you don't have to start running to the store like everyone else might be doing. So canned foods or dry foods or breads, pastas, they can last for a very long time. Pastas need cooking, but you can get things that don't need cooking. Buy a manual can opener, that means a can opener that's not electric. Buy flashlights and get extra batteries for the flashlights. Remember, 1 is to buy extra water. 2 is to buy extra food that lasts without refrigeration or cooking, and does not need cooking. Answer 3, buy a manual can opener. Answer 4, buy flashlights and extra batteries. Answer 5, buy a regular radio and a 2-way radio and extra batteries. It means buy a regular radio in order that you can hear what's going on when the snowstorm ended, if there's another snowstorm going on, and if there's any emergency information that they want you to know what to do. A 2-way radio, in case emergency happens, let's say the roof falls in or something, that you can reach people on the outside. Remember, the phone lines might be down, even the cell phone lines might be down. So also have, one answer is also make sure you have cell phones, but cell phones might not always work because they're, now another answer, answer 6, buy first aid supplies, which means also have all the medications that may be needed for the family during that time. If, let's say, people are on some type of medication for, let's say, I don't know, for heart, for blood sugar, or whatever it is, the person shouldn't take, of course, what they don't need, and it's not prescribed to them, but whatever medications they're normally taken, they should make sure they have it during those days. And if a person has the medication, he's going to have it, he's going to have the amount of enough for at least a week or 2. Usually it doesn't get just for 1 day. Usually someone who has some type of illness, or even not an illness, he needs a medication for something, usually has more than a few days. So you should make sure that it didn't expire, and so that's the answer to buy first aid supplies. That's a good answer. You can add on to that, have all medications that may be needed. Answer 7, have heating fuel. That means the fuel that heats the house, there should be enough to last you through the storm and maybe a little bit afterwards, just in case the storm lasts a little longer or the trucks can't come and refill the fuel. Nowadays a lot of people have gas heat, so that's not like it used to be that they had deposit of fuel next to the house was like a well that they filled up with fuel, and it went down after a while because people used it to heat their house, or at least they left it at 55 degrees that the pipe shouldn't break, so it shouldn't get too cold and bust the pipes. But now they have gas heat, and if something happens with the gas heat, then you're in trouble. So for that, answer 8, have backup heating source, which is, let's say, a wooden fireplace, or let's say a wooden stove. Of course, anyone who's in high school, I wouldn't tell them to take care of this part, because this could be very dangerous. This could cause a fire. But this is things that people could do. It's not speaking to people in high school, it's speaking to adults, that things that they could do to prepare for a forecasted severe snow event. Also, buy a shovel for the snow. And there's one thing that is not part of this, they don't really need, but kids, let's say, maybe we should have some type of entertainment to keep them busy. I don't know, a video that will get their mind off the problem if they're stuck inside the house and let's say part of the house caved in or something. Usually that won't happen in New York, but something, they might need something to entertain them. So also they can have that. But I don't know if that would be a good answer. Then you'll have to ask the teacher. So you have 9 answers over here, and you only need to pick 2 of them. One of them is buy at least 1 gallon of bottled water per person per day. 2, buy a lot of food that lasts long and does not need cooking or refrigeration. Because you have to remember that